Hi, this is Joe Lindsley. Welcome to our Land of the Free podcast with Ukrainska Pravda here in the studios in Kyiv. And I'm honored to introduce my friend, a fellow son of Ohio, Benya Stewart. Benya is a musician from Athens, Ohio. You were coming to Ukraine before the full-scale invasion, and now you're living here in Kyiv in the time of Russia's full-scale war. You're teaching English, and you're also using your musical talents to boost spirits in this difficult time, and to help even Ukrainians rediscover the roots of their music and to show this common culture of the songs of protest and of freedom. Benya, you've played for the troops near Bakhmut, in addition to concerts in Kyiv and Lviv. So great to have you here, my friend. And
thank you, Joe.
Yeah, I'm in your city actually now. So
yeah, it's true. I feel very at home in Kyiv. I love living here.
This is the land of the free. Stories of life and liberty in a time of war.
What was your and we're gonna have some songs from you today as well, which would be great. And maybe we start with that. What your song about you've written songs about your experience here in the war, and not just your experience, but the experience of Ukrainians. Why don't we start with that song you wrote back in Ohio when you went home for a while, thinking about your friends here in Ukraine?
Okay, yeah, we could start. This song is called "Not Alone," and it's a song I was writing last winter, and last winter was a lot different in Kyiv than this winter because there was almost no power. There was rationing of the electricity because Russia had hit so many of the power stations. A lot of people didn't have heat a lot of the time, so it was a dark winter. I mean, the first time I came to Kyiv last 2 Octobers ago, I mean, it was like completely black when Brett and I drove into the city.
And Brett is also a fellow Ohioan and musician.
Yeah, so Brett is Brett Hill, and he and I have been on a lot of adventures together, playing for troops, fundraising. We fundraised $100,000 in the first year of the war for Ukraine, mostly for tactical medicine. Also, some went to refugees and Ukrainian orphans who got rehomed. And that was part of a project called From Ohio with Love. So that was what we...
It's on my laptop here. I have the sticker.
Yeah, there you go. So that's what we could do, in that first year with our resources. We had already been coming to Ukraine. We had come twice for a musical project called Slava Lacha, which was something in collaboration with Ukrainians and Belarusians and Americans, being Brett and myself.
This is a project before the full-scale war, because back then, this is 2020?
Yeah, 2020. Yeah, January 2020 is when it kicked off, and we actually went to Belarus for a week, so I've been to Minsk, and this is before the big revolution in August 2020 when Lukashenko staged another election and a huge portion of the Minsk population rose up and did what they could, but ultimately, unfortunately, did not succeed in a Maidan-esque revolution, much to the chagrin of many. So I haven't been back to Belarus since then, and a lot of my friends in Belarus have been forced to leave the country and are living in exile. Many of them were in prison for multiple years after that episode with authoritarianism. So this is a big part of the story of why I'm in Ukraine. And it's interesting because now being in Ukraine and having connections to Belarus can be complicated. There's not always space in the conversation for the nuance that it requires. So it's an interesting thing. It reminds me of being back in the U.S.
Well, I remember, when we first met in Lviv in 2020 or 2021, Ukraine was a center of freedom and peace in the world. Yeah. And I remember, I met many Hong Kong activists who were here and learning from Ukrainians what happened with Maidan in 2014, and the same with the Belarusians. Yeah. And so it was so hard this was the place where you came to embrace freedom and to tell the story and to help people around the world. And then it became the center of the very fight for freedom. And that's why your Slava Lacha project, what would you call it? It was you're sort of
like a folk alliance.
A folk alliance for freedom and dignity and.
Yeah, I mean the concept was. I mean it was originally a sort of mixed activist and musical project. Like I mean our first real project together was making a video that was for the song "Which Side Are You On," and it was all
that old American protest song. Right?
Yes. Written by Florence Reese. She was the daughter of a coal miner whose father was part of this uprising, and there were some really bloody fights around the coal mines when these guys were trying to take some amount of dignity for themselves, and not just be, worked to death in the mines, which was happening quite frequently. And so she wrote the song "Which Side Are You On," which has become really like the main anthem of revolt and people's struggle in America and around the world. It's very popular. It's just such a catchy, simple idea. And some would say it's maybe too simple. I actually had a very interesting story or experience with a soldier who has heard the song many times, and he's kind of going through a bit of a mental struggle. I mean, he's been on the front line for most of the war.
Ukrainian soldier.
I'm a Ukrainian soldier, yeah. And I was there this Christmas. We did like a 5-day tour of the front lines, playing shows for different units. And he was really struggling, actually. He actually asked me to not play this song. And usually it's like a favorite of all the soldiers. Usually it's something they can really attach to. And because we added some Ukrainian lyrics, like a translation inside of the "Which side are you on? Na triti storoni." So it like involves the Ukrainians into this American song. So it's usually very popular. And this guy, he asked me to stop playing. He's like, it's too, I can't remember what exactly he said in his broken English, unfortunately. He was saying something like, this is too simple. It doesn't like communicate the whole message. This is too simple. It's not just one and the other side, really. And I think knowing what I know about, Belarus and the people there who are doing what they can, but can't always do enough or whatever. I mean, it's a complex situation, right? It's unfortunately, but we live in Ukraine, and we're here to stand for the Ukrainians. And right now, this is the moment to really stand up for this particular struggle. And so I keep coming down on the side of, it's complicated, but
in some ways,
I have chose to be here now. So this is my...
You've chosen your side.
Yeah.
And that, I think, that song, I play at the end of every one of our videos from my daily broadcast on Chicago radio. We post it on YouTube. I don't know if you know it, but I steal your song.
Yeah.
You guys singing it at the end, because I want people in America really to think about that. At the end, what would you have said in the 1930s? After if you were living in Germany or Europe in the 1930s, which side were you on? It does matter, and it's very clear in that sense. And we had a moment of great clarity with that in the city of Nikopol. You guys were playing a show down there for the locals.
Yeah.
Nikopol is on the Dnipro River, on the reservoir, across from the largest nuclear power plant in Europe. And we were there maybe 3 weeks before the Russians began to shell it every single night and day.
Yeah.
And we knew that could start any time. It was a bit scary to be there. We could see the Russian occupiers across the water.
Yeah.
And we had that strange but amazing little festival there with some soldiers and civilians and children. And you guys were singing. And when you sang that song, "Which Side Are You On?" we could see it right there. We're on this side of the water, and there they were on the other side.
Right.
It was incredibly powerful. Maybe can you play a bit of that song so people know what it is?
Yeah, sure. And this is usually a song, Brett has a deep connection to this song, so I don't typically play it solo, but which side are you on? Na triti storoni. Which side are you on? Na triti storoni. Come on, you good fine people, good news to you I'll tell, of how the good old Union is coming here to dwell. Which side are you on? Triti storoni. Which side are you on? Triti storoni. on it goes.
It's powerful, man.
Yeah, it really has been used by like every activist group for anything in America. Like, it's just so endlessly useful, right? But I think the interesting thing is it's not something you necessarily sing to the person who's already picked sides, and I think that's kind of what the soldier was getting at. It's like, this is the song you go to the city and like, hey, down in the coal mines, they're fighting for their lives. Let's go call our senators. Like, which side are you on, right? It's like to the people who haven't picked sides, right?
Exactly. The people you need to rally.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see why. I mean, here, after almost 2 years, people they're tired. There's a lot of trauma and wounds. And you have to heal in time to keep fighting. You can't just put it all, you can't say, oh, I'm just going to disappear from this for a while.
Yeah.
Most people can't do that. And music in the moment can help us heal. And that's why I think that Soldier probably, he wanted some other song that would help him in this process. And I think about when you've been now many times to the front lines and to play music, including last Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
Your first time at the front, as far as I remember, you went to Bakhmut before it fell.
Yeah.
And I remember you told me afterward, you said, this is the realest thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
Like a son of Ohio, from very peaceful land, from Athens, Ohio, from the Appalachians, and all of a sudden finding yourself in the middle of a war in a way you never imagined.
Yeah, I mean, really, Athens, Ohio, and I mean, so many places in America, but Athens, Ohio is a special spot because it's got a lot of the beauty of Appalachia, but it has it has the university there, so it has this little center of learning. There's a lot of globalism there. It's close enough to like Columbus, much larger city, so there's some real affluential people coming down and converting properties, which is not always obviously helpful. There's a gentrification thing happening there, but as opposed to a lot of Appalachia, which is really tends to be a somewhat economically and culturally depressed thing on the whole. I mean, of course, there's like amazing things happening in this mountain chain, but Athens is this special spot, and it's really like the Shire from Lord of the Rings. I mean, that's what it feels like. It has this peaceful little river. Everything is like rolling and gentle and lush and green, and it's just like, it was an amazing place to grow up. I feel like a hobbit that grew up there, and then like, I mean, Ukrainians love to use the Lord of the Rings mythos for this war as well, so it all kind of fits in.
Which,
right?
by the way, because since you mentioned that, when I speak with Americans who are skeptics of Ukraine,
Mm-hmm.
There are, and we have to understand them because it's, if we win over the Americans, we can get the weapons that Ukraine needs for victory. One of the complaints I hear is from a very powerful Republican donor. This person told me, I don't like it when I hear people talk about the orcs. It makes everything sound like a video game. Why do you make these Tolkien references? What's your response to that here?
Well, I don't think I do have reservations against dehumanizing like any human. I think it's better to think about Russians as like people who are making horrible decisions than like orcs, because I think orcs, it removes them of their power to maybe make a different decision, and I think that's probably not the way we should think about it. But at the same time, I'm not going to like sit Ukrainians down and like tell them that they should do anything different in this context, because it's like they're the ones whose kids and parents and grandparents and siblings have been killed by rockets by people who would appear to be orcs. You know what I mean? It's like this is the very delicate balance I think Americans and foreigners in general have to walk here. We obviously support Ukraine. We're risking our own lives to live here on some level. We're doing what we can to support as volunteers, or even just like telling our friends about it and like keeping the topic on people's tongues back in the U.S. if we can. But there is a complexity. I mean, and I don't think it's healthy. I don't personally go in for the orc side of it, even though it's like very attractive on some level, right?
Speaking of sort of very intense moments, you said, there at the front outside of Bakhmut, it was the realest thing you've ever done in a way, and almost like you're in some kind of superhero movie, right? But what for you has been maybe there's no answer to this, but the most frightening moment where you're like, holy shit, I'm in a war. What does anything come to mind? What was it? Maybe it's here in Kyiv during one of the attacks or something more.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because, I mean, people ask me quite frequently, like, isn't it scary? It's like, well, I mean, it should be. I don't know. I think because I haven't, like, seen a building get, like, hit in front of my eyes and been, like, showered in glass and shrapnel, or because I don't know anyone personally who, like, was injured. I mean, I've seen a ton of soldiers in hospitals who were injured, but it's like I haven't experienced the trauma myself of this type of violence. It's like I think should that happen, I'm obviously going to have a like totally different perspective on it, I think. But because that hasn't happened, it doesn't freak me out that much. I mean, I came here already. I came to Kyiv for the first time, 9 months after the full-scale invasion started, and all the Ukrainians were already so hardened to it. They were like, we don't go to shelter, it's like this kind of vibe. I mean, obviously, if you have kids, most people with children go to shelter, but a lot of single Ukrainians are kind of like, if it's my time, it's my time. Like, there's a kind of a devil-may-care vibe, and I somewhat, and that infected me a little bit. I mean, there was a time. The first time I heard an explosion in Ukraine was in Dnipro on the way to the Nikopol show, and I remember that Brett and I were sleeping in an apartment with a couple, like our Ukrainian companions on the way, and we weren't that freaked out, but the Ukrainians were, because they like know this is real, and we were kind of like, nah, it's fine, like whatever. We got the, sense of protection or whatever coming from this American suburbs or whatever. But I remember at like 5 a.m. an air alarm went off in Dnipro, and we both kind of like woke up, and we were like sharing a futon, and then I think maybe a few minutes later there was like an actual explosion, not super close, but it was just the first moment where it was like, oh god. And I remember we like looked at each other in the eye, and we were just like, we didn't say anything, but we were both thinking like, well, we did this. Like, we made all the decisions that brought us here. So,
and then a few hours later,
it's fine.
We were traveling together to Nikopol, traveling through those beautiful fields of southern Ukraine.
Yeah.
And on the ridge, you could see all of a sudden the nuclear power plant that the Russians are occupying.
Yeah.
And for the first time to be able to see
a Russian occupied
space. And it was, and we were all everyone kind of got quiet a little bit on the bus there, like, steeling ourselves to this. I mean, it was such a beautiful afternoon, and you had people folk dancing to the tune of your music, like dancing in the face of evil. That was one of my favorite and most inspiring moments from this. And you think about, what would you say? All right, for example, so when you've left Ukraine a few times, you went back to Ohio, you played charity concerts and raised money to buy medical kits and other things. I think drones and other stuff as well. Actually, you did. You bought some drones because you sent us some money, and we bought drones.
Yeah, we've definitely contributed. I mean, by far, almost all the dollars we raised were for tactical medicine, mostly just because it's something that Americans feel comfortable to fundraise for, so we could get more money that way, But
how do you feel when, like, the times you've gone back? So you're back, say, in Ohio, back in your shire, and I know you wrote a song about this, and we can listen to that.
Yeah.
But how do you feel when you cross the border and leave Ukraine? Is it like you've left a movie or something, or what does it feel like to you when you're far away from Ukraine?
I constantly had this sort of antsy feeling, and that's why I decided to move here, because it just didn't feel, even though on some level I could probably fundraise more effectively in the U.S. if that's what I felt called to do. You could just, dollars are just worth more, and people have more dollars to give, and like, I don't know how it is now. It's definitely much more difficult than the beginning of the war, but being in Ohio, being in Athens, working, at the time, for most of my adult life, I've been a builder, actually. So I was, doing carpentry in between all of these strange, tours abroad. And there was a long time in my 20s where that was really satisfying, and I was learning and like growing and learning how to make this tangible thing to like make a community better, give some value to other people. And I think at some point, and I was, growing food. I really wanted to have a farm. This is like all these like wholesome Shire type things. Like, this is what I wanted. This is why I stayed there, right? A lot of people leave Athens, but I stayed there. And I think the more that I was spending time in Ukraine, in a war zone, in a place where people are united by this, capital I idea, capital C concept, like freedom, like sovereignty, right? It's like, I mean, there are those struggles in the U.S., obviously. Like, there are those struggles for, African American rights, for trans rights, for so many things that, like, people want to fight for and have, like, fought for over the decades. And those are all really important. I think that seeing an entire civilization, like an entire society of Ukraine, working together to do something has just been so inspiring. Like, it's just like everyone, right? I mean, and I think that was a bit addictive in the beginning for me, was just seeing like there's not, people aren't really arguing. It's just like there's this massive task and everyone is just piling on to like play this huge deathly game of tug of war, and it's like obvious which side you're on, and you're just like, all right, this is the right thing to do. My guitar playing somehow has like something to offer this. That's cool. I want to do that, right? And so being back in the U.S., it was kind of like once that that had been itched, it was kind of like, I don't know anymore if this is like what makes sense for me. Like, I think maybe I want to go back to Ukraine. I was really super into the folk music. The more I've learned with the Ukrainian folk music, which is a whole other topic we could dive into. I mean, it's such a deep well. I mean, American folk music, it's kind of like, you could think of it as like a 30-foot deep well or 10-meter deep well, and like there's a lot of water there, but the Ukrainian folk tradition is like 1,000 feet deep, 300 feet deep. It's like they've been drinking from this water since like the most ancient time, since like people were speaking Proto-Indo-European, like we're talking thousands and thousands of years ago. And like the songs are probably like very related to some of those original songs. It's just been this unbroken, despite so many attempts of so many different empires and kingdoms, there's this unbroken chain of culture. And once I experienced that, that's another part. It's not just that there's this war and there's this fight for freedom. It's like there's this cultural side, which for me is just invaluable, and I want to be learning about it, studying it, participating in it. That requires learning more Ukrainian. It requires, singing with people all the time. I'm learning the fiddle now, so I can participate like in that side of it as well, the violin. So, yeah, and all of those things, it was like harder to do, obviously, when I was in Ohio, but I know that I want to do them. So it became very obvious, over the course of last year, like, I think I need to find a job here, but I didn't really know how to do it. I haven't had a normal job. Really, I've been a self-employed carpenter like my entire adult life, so it required a very different approach to life. But I did find a job at a
teaching English here.
Yeah, teaching English at a French private school for Ukrainian kids.
And I wanna ask about what folk music is and why it matters. But maybe before that, let's hear a bit of this song you wrote while you were in exile as a war back in Ohio. You wrote this in Ohio.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
About Ukraine, life and war in Ukraine.
Yeah, I was specifically really thinking about my little cluster of friends, many of whom are very active volunteers. And like there were a couple I remember there were a couple video calls where they were in a dark room sitting around a generator attached to a Starlink. And like that's all I mean, if they didn't have the generator, they would have had no service, they would have had no phone battery, and I wouldn't have been able to talk to them at all. And there were multiple days last winter where I couldn't. It's like, I will hear from you when I hear from you. Like,
Which, by the way, I want to always remind anyone watching and paying attention to Ukraine, like, this is a sign of success for Ukraine.
absolutely.
Because 1 year ago, we were living in the Middle Ages. It was cold and terrible and dark. And here we have power and electricity.
It's 100% thanks to American Patriot missiles.
Yeah. So thank you to the USA. Thank you to the Ukrainian ingenuity. But like, Russia wants to hide this news and obscure it from the world. Ukraine is triumphant already, and it's a continual process.
Mm-hmm.
But last year they thought they could freeze out Ukrainians. They're not even trying this year. The Russians aren't even hitting the infrastructure because they know it doesn't matter. The Ukrainians will still keep going.
Yeah, well, they shot a huge volley of rockets a couple times.
New Year's.
New Year's, and then in like mid-late-ish January. But most of them got, knocked out of the sky.
Yeah,
so
and we have power and light and heat.
So here we are recording a podcast, not on a generator.
Important to note.
So this is called Not Alone. I don't know if we'll do all of it. We'll do at least half of it. Set out to write you a song, so you know you're not alone. I know it feels so cold and bleak where you are, And then there's me, safe and warm, though my heart is still at war. 10,000 miles across the sea from where you are, I keep trying to put myself in your shoes, to understand your pain. All I wanna do is help you through, so I'll sing this little song for now. Take a rest, I see you holding the troubled world above your head, but it's not yours to fix or save by yourself. Set out to write you a song. I guess I'm feeling all alone and helpless too. I wish I knew you're safe from harm. I keep trying to put myself in your shoes, to understand your pain. All I wanna do is help you through, so I'll sing this little song for now.
Very nice, man. This it resonates too because so often we feel, sometimes it is easy for everyone here to feel a bit abandoned. But knowing also, I mean, there's people around the world who do care and who are doing everything they can to help. Whether it is by sending Patriot missiles or convincing Germany to send the weapons and all kinds of things around the world.
Well, calling their senators, I mean, that's such a thing that every American could do, right?
Yeah.
Every normal American.
And that's what's amazing about this war. Unlike any other, people far away can help. I think about the first Crimean War in the 1800s. That was the first war. There was photographs and telegraphs, and so
Yeah.
people could read about it.
Yeah.
And did you know this song, one of the great classics of American music, called Vastopol, named after the city of Sevastopol?
Mm-hmm.
And it was written by a guy from Ohio. Do you know this?
You've told me this story. Yeah, tell me again. Though.
It's so many people think that this song became the foundation of modern rock music. I think the Rolling Stones and others credit this song for it's the guitar picking and the rhythm of it. It was written by a guy, maybe he was from Athens. I don't know. I think it was Warren, Ohio, actually.
Oh,
Warren. Warren.
That's
and
not far, actually.
Not so far, yeah.
Yeah.
And so from this Appalachian tradition, and he was reading newspaper accounts of the war in Crimea in like 1850s. And he just, for some reason, we can't interview him. He's gone. He never wrote about it, but he was inspired to write this song called Vastopol. And actually, I play it on Chicago radio every time Ukraine has a great success in Crimea. I start off by playing the song because it's sort of a happy melody in a way, encouraging melody. The great famous American guitar picker, Elizabeth Cotton,
Yeah.
she plays this famously well. And I encourage people to look it up on YouTube. It's incredible guitar playing. But from Crimea, in a way, and Crimea was the first war where there was the people could follow along from all around the world. Now, all the more so you can do it, and you can actually contribute, as we've seen. I mean, people, not only people who send money for drones, but people who show up here to volunteer and to help. But we see that folk music, that's why I want to ask you, like, what, as someone who's a great practitioner of folk music, but not just in a theoretical way, but here in a fight for, an existential fight.
Yeah.
And you've studied Ukrainian folk traditions. What is folk music? Why does it matter? Why is it important? Why has it been important through the ages?
Well, I think music in general is this way for us to take our theoretical emotions and our souls feel maybe and put it out in space in a way that someone else can like interact with it. So that's all. I think all music is that. And then folk music is that, but it's something that you can inherit and has a tradition behind it. So it's not just me sitting here and noodling and like having the false experience of me like inventing a song, because that's not really how it happens. But like the folk music is important all around the world because it's a thing that connects you to your history. It's not a history book. It's like, what are the souls of my ancestors? What did they feel? And it enables me to feel the same thing they felt. I mean, come on. Why isn't that the coolest thing ever? Like it knocks out all the dates and like boring stuff of history and gives you all the like juice, right? It's like, oh yeah, this person also felt this like soul crushing love for this man or woman. Oh yeah, this person also experienced this like horrible drama that like affected their lives. Like it colors the people of history. And without, before we had recording machines, how could you have ever known anything about history if it wasn't preserved in a story? And what easier way to preserve a story than in song format, right? So that's why this matters. It's like it connects you directly to the actual experiences of your ancestry, right? But also to anyone else around the world. But that's why the tradition matters, why there's this resurgence in Ukrainian folk music right now, which was already building, but nothing like once the full-scale invasion happened. I mean, there's such an extraordinary resurgence in people who want to learn what they call authentic music. And this idea is, you want to find the oldest recording you can of some babusis singing this song in some little untouched village, and you sit around the recording and you like learn exactly how they sang it, and you transcribe the words because they're really sometimes hard to understand. Sometimes it's very dialectical and very not typical literary Ukrainian, and this practice of, thanks to these recordings, this weird little magnetic stuff on tape, we can like be transported back to this village where these people we'll never get to talk to can at least share this little fragment of their soul, which they inherited from their grandmothers, and so on. And it's like, I don't understand why it's not more popular, because I think it's just like the most magical thing that we could do to learn this. But
this is something that, and I know you've experienced this, and you've actually helped carry on these traditions, but I've seen it very deeply with Ukrainian Christmas, which Ukrainians just finished celebrating. Here it is in February. Yeah. It is a very deep celebration. I was just in Kyiv with our friends. You can pronounce the name of their band better.
Pirig I bati.
Which is something like dumpling and whip.
Well, pirig is pie. Like pirizhok is like a savory pie. Well, it can be sweet too. But our friend Marian Pirizhok has this incredible name, which means pie. And then they created this band, Ibatig, which means like the pie and the whip, like and the whipping cream or something. It's like the pie with the dressing.
They're great because they make the traditional music, they bring it into modern times, and hopefully we can have a session with them here. And they were going to Kharkiv in the east a few weeks ago, in January, to bring the Christmas traditions of Lviv, where the Soviets were not able to destroy things the way they could in the east, where the Moscow couldn't destroy things. And it was so wonderful. We were there. Kharkiv had been so pummeled in the previous days. Yeah. And we were underground at this concert. And these Ukrainian carols of Christmas are very meditative.
It's chant-like.
Chant, yeah. And this is what people actually sing in the West, especially around the table. You're not watching football games or TV, or
I know.
You're actually living. It's a lived tradition. It's not something you observe in an old movie. It's incredible. Yeah. And that's I mean, you've been such a part of that with your music, and I saw that in Kharkiv. I was at the show of Peri Batik, and there were soldiers and civilians, kids, grandparents, everyone, the whole spectrum of society, and everyone in that room had been through horrible trauma in the preceding days. Yeah, and they're all just singing this song about the birth of Christ, Christos Rodevsa, and this chant. It was magical. Yeah. So your experience of Ukrainian Christmas, like, to me, that's sort of the secret of the culture. It's all unlocked. It becomes revealed to me during that time.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing is, there was a time when there were ritual songs for every season, and this is just kind of the best preserved part because it was so important to Christianity, and it like blended conveniently, I think, with like the church's designs and desires. But there's a deep history of like spring songs that are much more like just a village tradition, and they're honestly very like primal and like this kind of like, it's like, whoa, what's going on? is this a song? Is this like like an actual ritual? What's happening? So that's a little bit of context. Is it's not just that Christmas has like its own songs, but because of this church thing, that the Orthodox Church obviously loves Christmas, just like every church loves Christmas.
And the Greek Catholics in Lviv.
And the Greek Catholics in Lviv, good call. So there was this, incredibly deep tradition of carols, they call them. So Kolyadki and Shedrivki, there's like two different versions of Christmas carols, and they're actually defined by their different rhythmic structure. That's the only difference, but they're used on different days slightly. So it's like a deep thing. And then there's also Malanka songs, and Malanka is more of the actual, it's the closest thing to the ritual date, right? And then these other things are more Christian. But
it's extraordinary, because we could be in the streets of Lviv, December and January,
Yeah.
and people just gather and they sing these together.
Oh, like every night.
Every night.
And it's like the same one. And it was so absurd because I was actually there recently right after New Year's, and I got to see a very cool art exhibit from a very popular guy in the Lviv community who's passed now, but he made these icons on glass. His name was Ostap. I can't remember his last name right now. But he is famous for having these big singing parties, these big carol parties in Lviv, and he really is like one of the reasons there is this super strong tradition, because his party was so popular every year and everyone was like looking forward to it, learning new carols, like digging up new carols, you know. And so they had this big party to commemorate him. And we were in this basement at Shevchenkivsky High. I can never say that.
Good job. I can never say that. It's a beautiful park.
A beautiful, amazing historical park. They've moved all these different...
On big holidays, people gather in the forest.
Yeah,
and sing and drink
like
and dance.
Forested, but they have all these old like Carpathian houses and houses from around Ukraine. They've moved there to like show all the different architectural styles. And so that was where the exhibit was. And then in the basement of one of the buildings, which of course is like this beautiful stone basement, all the people in the know kind of like left the exhibit around the same time, and we went down in this crypt and we sang carols, and we ultimately had like a wild kind of party. I had my violin, and they brought down this like historical drum from the museum, and we had this like dance party. But before that, we were singing these carols, and it's like every time I sing carols with Ukrainians, I hear another one I've never heard before. It's like there's got to be like 1,000, and it's insane. And not all Ukrainians know them either, you know, because it's such a deep thing, but you can learn them quite quickly because they are kind of these simple chants. Although usually they have, if you were counting them out, you'd be like, this is a very strange, you know, musical thing. Like that's almost all Ukrainian music has something really interesting about it, and yet is kind of repetitive enough that everyone can grab onto it and sing it together. But then we left that park, went to Fatset, of course, as you do.
Fatset is a great cafe in Lviv.
It's the cafe.
It's the cafe. It is. I've described it on the radio, and people say it reminds, you know, that people listening in America think, oh, this is like Rick's Cafe in Casablanca, but it's deeper than that because there's no bad. It's all the, you know, it is the. I mean, you'll have the soldiers on leave. You have people wounded in battle. You have the people preserving the folk traditions. The top volunteers. That's where people gather at this place, Fatset.
Yeah, but it's at the same time, it's like a hole in the wall, and sometimes it's totally empty, right?
Yeah.
But so we went there because we were all still vibing out, wanting to carol more, and there was like a whole other crew all in the same pal gang, and they were all singing, and so we like sang all the same carols again, right, as you do, but of course heard a few new ones. And then like there was another party after that, and it was just like, I mean, this is Lviv, right? It's like a wild time when it's
and it's
when
not boring.
to
Even you
celebrate,
repeat these. And I remember my first time at a Ukrainian Christmas dinner, as an American at first, I'm like, this is strange because you just repeat. Every song is so long, and you keep repeating the chorus, but then you get into the ritual rhythm of it, and like especially the dark times that come afterward. You look back on these moments; these are like wells of energy.
Yeah.
And strength. And I remember in particular, I think it was last summer, it was a day of music, International Day of Music, and Lviv really takes that seriously.
Oh, yeah.
And we were
Thanks to Marichka, yeah.
Yeah, and we were Marichka, a great
Chichkova,
musician in Lviv,
that.
a great, and we were outside of Fatset, and I think the day before, there had been major Russian missile strike on Lviv, which is pretty unusual. So everyone was a bit shaken. And I have a video of this, which I go back to in some of the dark times to watch. You guys, you and Brett and some Ukrainian musicians were singing one of my favorite folk songs about on the banks of the Danube, O Dunaju. Pray Dunaju.
Oyuhayu, Pray Dunaju.
Not Ohio.
Right. In the grove, Oyuhayu.
Oyuhayu. Shishkinsky Hai.
Yeah, exactly, in the forest.
And it was this amazing meditation. It was a beautiful sunny afternoon after the horrible preceding day, and everyone is singing together.
Yeah.
This song, and I've been on the Danube in Budapest and other places, but a few months ago I went down to Bessarabia, in this part of Ukraine that borders Romania and Moldova, on the Danube River.
Mm-hmm.
This is where that amazing effort to export grain is happening, despite the Russian threats. And I'm sitting there on the banks of the Danube, and we just been attacked by drones the night before at the port there. And I just had this nice moment on the Danube, and I played that recording from you guys singing the preceding summer in Lviv. It would be great to hear that. It's one of my favorite songs.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's about, what is it about? Can you tell? It's just about being on the, is it so old ancient folk song about?
Yeah, I don't have a good sense of like how old this folk song is. It was certainly in existence, and it was popularized by Trio Marenic. I think their record came out in the early 70s, and they were a trio, I think 2 guitarists and a lady singer. And they sing this it was very of the time of like, I don't know, this kind of chill folk song with like very haunting female vocals and like lots of finger picky, like kind of sounds of silence a little bit, Simon and Garfunkel, but obviously with female vocal. But so it's very of the time. But I still haven't quite understood, like, I don't think it's like an old folk song, but anyway, I wish I
And
knew more about
as you listen to it, I think like I'm listening to it on the banks of the Danube, and I look across the river. I can see Romania. I can see a land that simply because it's across the river is not at war. There is debris sometimes that falls when Russia sends missiles and drones, but I could see just across that water, not that far.
Yeah, that's what peace looks like.
I can see what peace looks like, and what it could be when it returns here.
And it's kind of the far opposite of looking across and seeing the Russians across from Nikopol. It's a fascinating spectrum of experience you've had there.
So that earlier song we heard, "Which Side Are You On," was about division. This song, for me at least, in that moment, was about the hope for the future.
Yeah, and this song is super unifying. I mean, this is a song that every Ukrainian almost has in their genetic code. It seems like even if they don't know they know it, they're like, oh yeah, like it's one of these songs like my grandpa used to play on the radio or something. Like it's just in there.
So let's hear. It's Predunayu. It's
Oyu Hayu Predunayu.
In the forest grove near the banks of the Danube River.
That's right. And it's, you asked what it means. The person who is singing it, it's probably the perspective of a woman. She's missing her lover. He was a musician, but he's gone. We don't know why. But she's walking through the forest and hearing sort of like ghostly memories of him and his friends playing music together, like in this forest, Oyu hayu pridunaju solove ščeveče, vinstuju v subtašinu, donizdečka kliče. Oj tjok tjok i tjok 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 solove ščeveče, vinstuju v subtašinu, donizdečka kliče. Oj tjok 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 solove ščeveče, vinstuju v subtašinu, donizdečka kliče. Ою гаю придунаю, там музика грає, повсюди скрипка плаче, милими гуляє. Ой тьок-тьок і тьок-тьок-тьок, там музика грає, повсюди скрипка плаче, милими гуляє. Ой тьок-тьок і тьок-тьок-тьок, там музика грає, повсюди скрипка плаче, милими гуляє. Ою гаю придунаю, стою самотою, плачу, тужу, ще ридаю, милий за тобою. Ой, тьок-тьок, і тьок-тьок-тьок, стою самотою, плачу, тужу, ще ридаю, милий за тобою. Ой, тьок-тьок, і тьок-тьок-тьок, соловей щебече, він стою всю пташину, до гніздечка кличе, до гніздечка кличе.
Wow, дякую, man. Thank you. That was a wonderful song, and you think, as what music can do, as you say, it can heal, but also inspire people, give us strength to whatever we might face. We don't know when the next missiles will be hitting, or what bad news we might be receiving next.
No doubt.
And I think about sitting there at that cafe in Lviv, Fatset, when you were singing that song last summer outside. I could look at different seats outside where people who used to sit, who has now been killed, including many heroes of Maidan who went to fight, and I could always see them in the seats where they used to sit, and listening to all those voices singing. And this is through these songs, it's a story of people who won't be slaves, right? The story of people who refuse to be silenced. This is but the music is both the indicator of that, but also it's the engine of it, right? It helps inspire.
Yeah.
What was it like for you at Christmas time when you went to play for the soldiers at the front? What was your feeling there?
It was difficult. It was maybe the most emotionally challenging time I've gone. This was the fourth trip I've gone. I went with an impromptu band, which was very cool. We put together a little 4-piece, kind of a 5-piece, because our driver also sometimes did percussion with us. But a little group, 3 of the musicians were Ukrainians. So we had Leszek Yakimchuk. He's the one of the two founders of UA First Aid, and this is the organization that Brett and I were bringing a lot of tourniquets and IFAKs for. And they, Leszek and his girlfriend Olena, 2 very dear friends of mine, they were in Ohio. They were at Ohio University studying when the full-scale invasion broke out, and within a week they had packed their suitcases full of medical supplies, leaving all of their clothes, and moved back to Ukraine, which, if you don't realize this, it means Leszek came back even when he, as a man, once you come back in the country as a man, you can't leave. So this was a big decision for both of them. And so they came back and were volunteering, doing what they could. And by the summer, UA First Aid had just kind of come into existence. Just simply, there was just one random time, a soldier was like, we need IFAKs. We've got no medical gear. And Leszek successfully got some money together on Facebook and got these IFAKs, got them to the guys. And then the calls just kept coming. That people heard that he could get the stuff, and it just kept coming and coming and coming. And so they just had to create this organization. And they're both people, bless their souls, and they just can't say no when people are in need, right? And so they've raised over $1 million worth of medical gear since the start of the war. And Brett and I contributed 10% of that. And what we did was big, but it's insane what they've been able to do. And you can read about them. New York Times did an article on them back in this past summer, UA First Aid. So that's who I go to the front with, is Leszek. He's also a great musician. He even played at Maidan when he was a young man.
In the revolution in 2014.
They had this thing where they would have a stage all night because they couldn't leave. You had to keep Maidan full of people, right? You couldn't all leave or the cops would come take it back over. So they would have musicians through the brutal winter. They'd play all night. He was playing a guitar out on stage in the winter at like 4 a.m. His set was like at 4 a.m. And so he has like been through this stuff, right?
And that's important to remember. It's 10 years ago, right now, 10 years ago. Right now we have so many Americans who praise protest movements in Germany and France, the farmers' protests and all that. And and they're missing the story of what happened 10 years ago. And that's the very reason why this war is happening now, because Ukrainians 10 years ago stood in those squares. And I didn't know this about the music, how the music kept them going.
Yeah.
But that's when they said, we're not going to be controlled by corrupt tyrants.
Yeah.
And the artist played a big role in that.
Yeah. And interestingly, I mean, some of the connections he had from Maidan is really how the UA First Aid got started too, because people who were big activists in Maidan, many of them joined the army as soon as the full-scale invasion happened or before. And those connections are like the people who were calling him for the IFACs, right? And that's the unit Brett and I went to play for in the 93rd 2 Octobers ago. That connection was like his friend, from Maidan that like got us there. So it's all interconnected, right? But sorry, what was your original question?
Well, I don't know, but I want to ask this one because I want to. Have you had a person? I mean, in war, as I think we've seen, I mean, it makes things very clear which side are you on and all that. And have you had any personal transformation here, or is there?
Well, in Ukraine for sure. I mean, when I first came to Ukraine, it was 4 days after my ex-wife and I had decided to break up, like in 2020, and we had been together for like pretty much my entire adult life. So it's like, I've had these big different phases in my life. It's like after college, I was really with her, and we were doing this like farm thing, this like Shire, big time Shire life, which is totally a cool way to go. And like we, all the respect in that relationship, it just didn't work out, and it's fine. But like, it was just it was almost to the day that we were like ending that in an official way. And then January 6th, Brett and I get in my Prius with our friend Quentin and drive to New York from Ohio to park the Prius in some freaking neighborhood, that this was all lined up by our Belarusian friends back in Slavolacha days. And we go catch like 7 different flights to like hop across Europe and get first to Minsk and then ultimately to Lviv and then Karpaty. And that first trip of Slavolacha was super transformational for me. I mean, that's when we first learned Oyuhаю Pridunai. It's when I first heard Ukrainian music. It's when I first met Ukrainians in person. It's when we saw the Carpathian Mountains for the first time. It's when we saw Lviv for the first time. And I mean, I wish I could see Lviv for the first time again. Like, I've been thinking about that the last few times I've gone. It's like, this is too normal now. Like, why I take this way too, like, this is the most beautiful city in the world, and it's like normal, and it's strange. Because I remember the first time I showed up, I was just ogling everything. Like, every building is gorgeous, right? And the first time I had Ukrainian food, all these firsts, right? And we went to Karpaty. With the Carpathian Mountains, they call it Karpaty here, and we went to a little village called Tustan, and we had rented like a little cabin to jam in for like 2 days with our new band at this musical project. And I had this, I was obviously having this intense emotional experience because I'm like in the middle of like breaking up with my wife, and we're having all these great musical experiences, but I'm kind of overwhelmed at one moment, and we're outside. We've got a couple bonfires going. We're hanging out, getting to know each other, right? And I walk off. We're on the river Stry, and it's a super clear night. Also, strange side note, this was the first night I ever saw Starlink satellites, which was super creepy.
I remember that night. They were launching. I was.
They were like, imagine that you don't know what's happening in the world, and you look up and you're having a like come to God moment. And there, you see 60 stars flying in a perfect straight line in perfect speed with each other across the night sky, and they look like stars. And I mean, I was honestly terrified. I was like, what is happening?
This is June 2021, right? I was in Yavoriv on a camping trip.
Yeah.
Yavoriv later became famous because of the military training base there
Yeah.
that was horribly bombed.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there, and there were so many monuments there to World War II.
Yeah.
And I'd been there all day while we were hiking, thinking, this is where the Nazis were,
Yeah.
and World War II, and all the, and like, I can't imagine war ever coming here.
Right.
And then that night, I saw those, we didn't know what it was at first, the 60 Starlinks, with the satellites being launched.
Musk's.
So you were in the Carpathians.
I was in the Carpathians. We weren't that far from each other.
Shit.
But regardless of that, I walked off along this river, and it was super clear, beautiful night, and I was just kind of having a moment alone. And it was the night that moment was, I just feel like I accepted all these things about like the next phase of my life. Like, okay, music. I'm going to do music. Okay. Like, mandolin. I'm going to learn mandolin. Okay, Ukraine. I'm going to keep coming back to Ukraine. Like, all these things just felt so right, and my life was suddenly like opened up in this way that it obviously had not been. And I just kind of felt like, I mean, you know, they had flown me and Brett across the world to like make music with them, and you know, that's an incredible feeling, obviously, like when that's very validating, like, okay, someone wants to hear my music over there, like this powerful feeling, right? So all these things kind of came together, and this was, you know, that was really like the first major step that lands me here, right? I mean, to go back to your original question, have I been changed dramatically since the war? I think it might be hard for me to tell. I mean, I feel very much like in my element, and like that I'm doing what I am supposed to be doing here, which is an amazing feeling, right? And I think it kind of shelters me from some of the fear and some of the like anxiety that other people might feel, because it just, I don't know, like you referenced our initial interview from when I came back from Bakhmut, the realest thing I ever did, right? I was thinking about that today, like getting ready for this interview, getting ready to come here, and thinking about like, you know, history has been happening for all time, and the vast majority of people just read about it in books, but like when you have the opportunity to go experience it and you don't take it, I mean, you can do whatever you want, but I'm going to take the opportunity. Like, that just felt so absolutely correct for me. It's like, I don't know, if my guitar has something to offer someone in a place where they are fighting for their freedom, it's just like, it's just a no-brainer. Like, I don't know, it doesn't, the calculation is not important really for me. It would have been if I was married, right? But like, I don't have this like consideration of a family in the same way, you know.
So, and this I think is a good setup for we can close with this this song that you wrote, "Mighty Big War," because it's big and it has huge implications. Many people in the world don't realize perhaps the implications yet. Many do, but also it happens on a micro level. That's right. It's individual people that make choices, like Lessig, to come back here. The people that choose to go to the front and fight. The people that choose not to get tired and choose not to give up. But it's all of this together is a mighty big war. It's a mighty big effort. And this is a song of yours that is on an album, I think, that you're releasing
very, very
forthwith.
soon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
album is called Three Gardens.
Three Gardens.
This is an album, a collaborative album that I and Brother Hill, and Serjuk Dohusha, we recorded this in April 2022. Yeah, so like 2 months after the war started. Not even 2 months after the war started. And this was an effort to process the big feelings we were having. And Brett and Serjuk and I were all part of this Slavolacha project. We were all the non-Ukrainians in the Slavolacha project. And our Ukrainian counterparts were busy making Molotov cocktails in Ukraine. And we were in America like, what do we do? Like, what do we do? And we were music was a part of our process, right? And so we had this kind of realization, like, we should record this. This is a really important, special moment in time for us and for the world. And maybe this music will resonate with other people. So it's a combination of American, Ukrainian, and Belarusian folk songs. It's all coming from a place of love and support for Ukraine. We call it a love letter to Ukraine. And some of our, I mean, really, this is like the material that we used to fundraise with in a big way for all those big From Ohio with Love concerts. So it's also kind of a record of that. And the final song on the album is called Mighty Big War. It's a song I adapted. It is originally a Woody Guthrie song. And for those of you who don't know, one of Bob Dylan's biggest inspirations, Woody Guthrie was an American folk singer who wrote his first song. This was his first song that he ever wrote and produced about the Dust Bowl, an environmental disaster that displaced something like 4 or 5 million people in Oklahoma, Texas, and a little bit in Colorado. And this was an environmental disaster caused by over-farming, over-plowing of land that has not enough moisture. And he was a very young man when the Dust Bowl happened, and he was suddenly plunged into a time of absolute chaos, similar to, when the full-scale invasion happened here, and all of this homelessness and refugee. It was a refugee crisis. Something like, I shouldn't say an actual number, but I think it is like 12% of Californian DNA is connected to Oklahoman DNA because of this episode. Like, so many people left Oklahoma for California because of the Dust Bowl. And this song originally was called Dusty Old Dust, and it was about everyone having to leave their home because the land was ruined, the farms were all gone, it was just a desert now, right? And then, about 10 years later, World War II breaks out, and Woody goes to fight in World War II, and he rewrites his song Dusty Old Dust to be about going to fight the Nazis. And then he called the song So Long It's Been Good to Know Ya, right? So the chorus is So long it's been good to know ya 3 times. And then it's a mighty big war that's got to be won. Then we'll get back together again, right? So those are his words. These are Woody's words. And in March right after the invasion started, I was just looking for ways to process and write about the war. And I stumbled on this rewrite. I never knew he rewrote it about World War II. I was kind of digging through some of his not very popular albums, not very well known, and I found this rewrite. I was like, what? Because I already sang Dusty Old Dust. I love that song. And it really resonated with me. Obviously, the war had started, so I was like, well, that's kind of a no-brainer. So then I rewrote most of the verses. Some of them are actually almost the same. For example, the Lovers verse, which you'll hear, that's close to the original.
So this is Mighty Big War, your version from the album Three Gardens.
That's right.
Which, by the way, our great friend Mikhailo Scope, Ukrainian artist Navon made, who made the logo for this podcast,
Awesome.
Land of the Free, also made your album artwork for this.
Yeah, he's made a lot of amazing art for various projects.
A great patriot, helping
Yep.
Ukraine any way he can.
Yep.
And so this is from Three Gardens, Mighty Big War, Benya Stewart, son of Ohio, living here in Kyiv in a time of war until victory.
Дякую, Josip. It happened the winter I hunkered in Maine, that a modern-day Hitler invaded Ukraine. Well, his people believed every word of his lies. What an awful, strange world us humans devise, singing so long. It's been good to know you so long. It's been good to know you well so long. It's been good to know you. It's a mighty big war that's gotta be won. Then we'll get back together again. Well, the shelling began in the dark before dawn. The whole world was speechless after peace for so long. For Kharkiv and Kherson and Kyiv they come. Well, the sirens were wailing as the rockets were flung, singing so long. It's been good to know you so long. It's been good to know you well so long. It's been good to know you. It's a mighty big war that's gotta be won. Then we'll get back together again. Now out of Crimea them tanks would have rolled, save for the bravery of Vitaly's good soul. Well, he climbed down the bridge with the tanks overhead. Yeah, he gave up his life to see everyone dead, singing so long. It's been good to know you so long. It's been good to know you well so long. It's been good to know you. It's a mighty big war that's gotta be won. Then we'll get back together again. Well, the telephone rang and it jumped off the wall. President Biden making his call. Zelensky said, thanks, but we don't need that right now. We'd sure take some NATO boys up in the sky, singing so long. It's been good to know you so long. It's been good to know you well so long. It's been good to know you. It's a mighty big war that's gotta be won. Then we'll get back together again. Well, lovers, they sat in the dark and they sparked and they hugged and they kissed in the dusty old dark, and then back to the mixing of the Molotov piss. Yeah, instead of marriage they talk like this, singing so long. It's been good to know you so long. It's been good to know you well so long. It's been good to know you. It's a mighty big war that's gotta be won. Then we'll get back together again. Lord, spare me the strength to sing of the whole, the smoldering wreckage of Mariupol. They couldn't be bothered to aim a bit wide of even a theater with children inside, singing so long. It's been good to know you so long. It's been good to know you well so long. It's been good to know you. It's a mighty big war that's gotta be won. Then we'll get back together again. Well, the whole world can see that Putin's a fool. He fuckered around and he found out the rule. They're not going back to their Soviet chains. No, they'll fight to the death for a sovereign Ukraine, singing so long. It's been good to know you so long. It's been good to know you well so long. It's been good to know you. It's a mighty big war that's gotta be won. Well, Slava, Slava Ukraini, Slava, Slava Ukraini, Slava, Slava Ukraini. It's a mighty big war that's gotta be won. Well, Slava, Slava Ukraini, Slava, Slava Ukraini, well, Slava, Slava Ukraini. It's a mighty big war that's gotta be won. and then we'll get back together again.
Benya Stewart, дуже дякую, my friend.
Дякую всім.
Wonderful. We'll have links to your music in the description below. Benya Stewart from Ohio, here in Kyiv,
In the land of freedom.
on our Land of the Free podcast.
Land of the free.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Ukrainska Pravda. You can follow our stories at UkrainianFreedomNews.com. Every single day I'm reporting on Chicago's WGN Radio. Until victory, every single day you're playing here. Until victory, thank you from Kyiv.